Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Timing and FreshBooks. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Vitici. Hi, Federico.
Hey, John, how are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. It's the rumor is that you're back in the big city. You're back enjoying Roma again. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going really well. I kind of miss being at the beach.
I bet.
I really enjoy spending time there and working from the beach. Still, it's good to be back in the city, especially now that it's, new iPhone season, which means I have an Apple store nearby, actually new iPhone, new iPads, and new watches maybe. So
Oh
the
yeah.
comfort of the city comes in handy when you have an Apple store 5 minutes away from you.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, it's going to be a busy couple of weeks, but before we're still several days away from that. I thought we've got a new topic today, but before we get to it, we've got a little bit of follow up from our discussion last week about reminders, and we focused last week primarily on task management type apps that were built on top of reminders. And one of our listeners, David Bird, he reminded me that an app that we've both used called Grocery, also uses reminders. And that's handy to know because Grocery is probably, I'd say, the best grocery shopping app that's out there.
Yeah, it's really an ingenious take on the traditional grocery shopping app, and I totally forgot that it had reminders integration. Another one that I forgot that had not just integration but full on like reminders can be used as a sync method is To Do, spelled two with the number and do. I covered To Do on Mac Stories I think about 3 to 4 years ago, back when it used to be my only task manager. And one of the ways that you can sync To Do across multiple devices is iCloud with reminders.
Right.
And of course, there are some drawbacks to using reminders. For example, some metadata is lost. If you open the reminders app, you will not see some of the special formatting that To Do uses. So you have to use To Do both on iOS and macOS if you want to see the same metadata for reminders. But otherwise, just like Good Task, which we covered last week, To Do allows you to create smart lists and smart views so that you can filter tasks by specific criteria, whether it's date or text contained in the title or in the notes. And actually, now that I'm using reminders, I think I should actually check out the To Do again with reminders sync enabled. And one of the benefits of using reminders as your task manager database is that you can switch between multiple clients and you don't really have the pressure of moving all of your tasks and projects from one app to the other because those lists always exist on your device. So it's kind of like trying multiple email clients in that your account lives in the cloud.
Right.
Only here, the idea would be that your projects and your to-dos live on your iOS device and on iCloud. So it's really easy to switch back and forth and see what you prefer. It's not a closed system. That's what we've been trying to say last week.
Right.
Yeah, and also I feel like we should have mentioned that most apps like OmniFocus and Things and Todoist, they have mostly moved onto direct Siri integration with SiriKit so that you can use Siri and the specific commands such as in OmniFocus do this or in my Todoist do that. So they have adopted SiriKit integrations instead of iCloud reminders integration, but still, I think at least Things and OmniFocus, they can import your reminders from a specific list. So that's kind of one of the old school workarounds in that you can say in Things, for example, whenever you see an item added to this reminders list, and I think in OmniFocus is actually the same, make sure you import this reminder into the inbox and either delete or mark as completed the original item in the reminders app.
Right.
That was one of the old workarounds, but these days, I guess if you're an OmniFocus or Things user, the best way is probably to just talk to Siri and add the tasks from there.
Right. Those apps worked very much like the way Do does now. And we talked about Do last week, which I just recently reviewed on Mac Stories. And it does the same thing. It imports from a specified list, and then you can have it delete from the original reminders list. It's just a way to basically automatically import things into another app. Thanks to Timing for supporting App Stories. Time is your most precious resource. You need to know how you are spending it. But manual time tracking interrupts your workflow, and it's easy to lose track of. Timing is different. It automatically tracks how you spend your time on your Mac. It's an app we've reviewed on Mac Stories and like a lot. It shows you how much time you spend per app, website, and document, and categorizes that time into projects. Timing even helps you be more productive by analyzing when you were wasting time the most. On top of all that, Timing has a new sync service that automatically keeps your timing data in sync across multiple Macs. Timing stays on top of the latest innovations in macOS 2. For example, when Mojave is released, Timing is ready with a new dark mode. And to save you more time, Timing comes with plenty of automation features too, such as rules to automatically categorize your tasks. Timing can even ask you what you did when you return to your Mac so you never forget to track a meeting outside your office. Download the free 14-day trial today at timingapp.com/appstories so they know you came from the show and save 10% when you purchase. Again, that's timingapp.com/appstories. Using that URL, you'll save 10% when you purchase. Timing. Stop worrying about time and focus on doing your best work instead. Thanks again to Timing for sponsoring App Stories. So today, Federico, I thought we would talk about Twitter. And in particular, I want to talk about Twitter clients, but also some apps in and around the Twitter space. Twitter obviously has been in the news a lot lately, a lot of controversy. I mean, it's having all sorts of problems with harassment, election influencing in the United States. Jack Dorsey was just in front of Congress here yesterday testifying along with Facebook about things like that. We're not going to talk about those issues now. What we're going to talk about is Twitter, because we're both still on Twitter, and we're going to talk a little bit about the apps that we use and some of the tricks that we've implemented over time to use it effectively. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds awesome. All right, let's get started. I feel like we should start by talking about Tweetbot, which is I think it's the client that we both use as our primary client. I'm not sure if you'll switch to Twitterific anywhere. I'm using Tweetbot.
Yeah, no, I'm still using Tweetbot too, and I have thought about Twitterific, and maybe we can talk about the reasons why I've thought about it as we go along. But we should start with Tweetbot. Maybe you want to take the lead on that one?
Sure. I mean, I've been using Tweetbot for the past, I want to say 5 years, 6 years maybe. Ever since the very first version of Tweetbot came out, I've been using it as my primary client for Twitter. And there have been times when I switched for like a period of time to the official Twitter app or to Twitterific, but eventually always go back to Tweetbot. And there are a handful of reasons why I really like Tweetbot. I mean, before I used to mention, it had streaming and the timeline sync is still here, which is one of the big features, but streaming really made it stand out from the Twitter app and Twitterific before the Icon Factory brought streaming to the mobile client.
Right.
These days, I use Tweetbot, well, first of all, because I really like the design and it looks and it feels fast and efficient. It's not clunky. It's the scrolling, even hundreds of tweets is fluid and fast. I like timeline sync because as much as I've tried not to be a timeline completionist, I've been using Twitter for the past 9 years in a very specific way, and it's always been the same way. I start from the bottom and I scroll all the way to the top until I've seen every tweet in my timeline.
Right.
I realize this is unhealthy for me, but also I feel like I've been able to extract real value from being able to either get to know new people or find interesting apps or links or articles that somebody shared in my timeline. And I feel like that's the reason why I'm still using Twitter today, even though the service and the network has, really, really went downhill, especially over the past couple of years. But still, I find interesting things that I can use for the site or I can use for Club Mac Stories or for my podcasts. And Tweetbot makes it easy to do so because I can just tap on a tweet to mark it as a favorite, or I can invoke the share sheet just by tapping on the tweet and opening the action bar. Also, on the iPad, I feel like I should mention that on the iPad, Tweetbot is the only app that really takes advantage of the big screen by using a column on the right side. And this column allows you to change the view that is displayed in the sidebar. And in my case, and I've talked about this before, I really like the idea of being able to scroll my mentions in two different directions on screen at the same time. On the right side, I usually keep my mentions pinned to the top so that as new mentions come in, I see the new ones.
Mm-hmm.
And on the left side, I scroll through my old mentions. And this allows me to reply to all the tweets that people have sent to me. But on the right side, if somebody replies right away, I can continue the conversation while I'm still using Twitter.
All right.
I don't have Twitter notifications enabled, so I go through my mentions in very specific bursts throughout the day, like 10, 15 minutes. And I dedicate those 15 minutes to replying to people on Twitter. That layout helps.
Right. I've noticed you doing that before. And that's an interesting approach. I know you talked about this maybe a couple of episodes ago in Connected. And so what you're doing is just like if you were just in your regular timeline and you were going from the oldest tweet to the newest one, as you catch up from, say you were gone for 3 hours, catching up on your tweets, you do the same thing with your mentions, but you keep the second column pinned to the top so that as you maybe reply to someone, if they respond to you again right away, you can continue that conversation and you'll see that response in the other column, right?
That's exactly right. Yes, that's what I do.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I like that. All right. I think I use Twitter in a similar way. I don't do what you do with the two column thing, but I wouldn't say I'm not a completionist in the sense that I don't feel stressed out if I have a really busy day and I just look at it and there's 300 tweets and like, oh, screw it. And I just scroll up to the top. That's fine. But for the most part, I try to see them because I find the same thing. I find all sorts of useful information in there for things I'm working on. And there's this, if you follow people who you write about and people who maybe we interview on Club Mac Stories or things like that, you almost through osmosis learn about what they're working on more without ever having to speak to them directly. And it gives you a context in which to do a quick interview with somebody or know the background about a particular app that's coming up. So I find it really useful too. Probably the thing I like the most about what remains in Tweetbot are the timed mutes because
oh yes,
you can mute someone, you can mute someone for a day, a week, or a month or forever. I think those are the 4 options. And I've got a really good refined sense of when somebody should be muted for a day and maybe they should be muted forever or a month or whatever it is. And it's not just people, it's topics. Like if there's some crazy story about a new movie that came out that you just don't care about or some news story or whatever it is, muting that a keyword related to that for a week is awesome. It just totally gets rid of it, right? Or maybe just someone is having a crazy day and they're tweeting like crazy about something that's just not something that you really care about. So just mute them for a day and it's cool and they'll be back and everything's fine. I love that. And something that Twitterrific doesn't have. They have muffles, which we'll get into, but I wish that Twitterrific had timed mutes and muffles too, because that's to me one of the biggest benefits of Tweetbot. One of the things that I miss a lot, it used to have a view called activity and stats, which showed you like a chart that I guess it accumulated your retweets and likes and mentions and all this stuff into kind of a number and showed you generally what was going on with your timeline and your tweets and all that stuff. And you could then go into the activities section of that and see just a chronological list of all the people who followed you and retweeted you and all that kind of stuff. And yes, it was a vanity tab. And I'll admit that I used it and I liked it. And it's gone now because that relied on some of the APIs that Twitter took away. What was it, like 3 weeks ago now?
Yeah.
And it's felt, to me, that's felt like it blew a hole in Tweetbot. Because to me, that was one of the things that made Tweetbot special. It was really like one of those surface level things that you could go into that app and you could see that this was a distinct characteristic of how Tweetbot worked. And that's gone, but I'm sticking with Tweetbot at the moment just because for a lot of the same reasons you already mentioned.
Yeah, the time mutes have been a lifesaver for me, especially because I like to keep up with what happens in the United States, but really I don't need to know the details of the entire political spectrum in terms of American news. We should talk about Twitterrific because I feel like there's a lot that the Icon Factory does differently from Tweetbot and a lot to appreciate in Twitterrific. I want to mention the fact that Twitterrific, I feel like it looks really polished in terms of design. It's an attractive app. I really like the way that the icons have been drawn and the colors and the general aesthetic of Twitterrific I really appreciate. But there's something about Twitterrific for me that I don't know if it's the scrolling, I don't know if it's the way that timeline sync has been implemented and the way that the app scrolls. It just doesn't feel as fluid or as smooth as Tweetbot to me. It always feels a little bit clunkier in terms of how you can scroll and open the detail view of a tweet, for example. And one of the key differences between Tweetbot and Twitterrific is that Tweetbot allows me to check the people who retweeted any of my tweets or tweets from other people. When you open the detail view for a tweet in Tweetbot, you can tap on the retweet count and you can see a list of people who retweeted that message.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot do the same in Twitterrific. But what I like about Twitterrific is that they try to innovate with these small features that are really handy. For example, Twitterrific allows you to sort of has a fake edit mode. Of course, Twitter doesn't let you edit tweets.
Right.
If you have a typo, you gotta delete the tweet and resend it or just leave it there forever. But with Twitterrific, what you can do is there's a delete and retype sort of mode in that you can delete the previous message and a new compose window opens automatically and it's pre-filled with the text from the previous tweet so that you can just fix the typo and send it again. I think that was a really ingenious feature when they introduced it a few years ago. And also I want to highlight the fact that Twitterrific has better media previews for more types of links than Tweetbot. I'm pretty sure that Twitterrific can preview, Spotify links, SoundCloud links, other types of links that are not supported natively by Tweetbot. And so when you scroll the timeline in Twitterrific, you see a richer selection of thumbnail previews for different types of links, which I think really helps especially if you follow people that tend to share links to new albums or podcasts on SoundCloud. I think that's really convenient.
Yeah, that is really nice. And they also have kind of a nice hack workaround for Twitter polls, which is another thing that third-party clients don't have direct access to through the API. But Twitterrific has found, and the Icon Factory has found a way to deal with that within the app by using, don't they use the Safari web view?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, the Safari View Controller. Yeah.
Right.
And they even theme it. So they can use themes for Safari View Controller. That's a new API, I think, from iOS 11. In that if you use Twitterrific with the dark mode, and when you open Safari View Controller, it will not be white, but it will be dark. So it matches the color of the app.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by FreshBooks. To all the freelancers out there, you know how important it is to make smart decisions about your business. Our friends at FreshBooks can save you up to 192 hours with their cloud accounting software for freelancers that's ridiculously easy to use. Here's how they do it. By simplifying tasks like invoicing, tracking expenses, and getting paid online, FreshBooks has dramatically reduced the time it takes for over 10 million people to deal with their paperwork. I want to talk to you a little bit about invoicing today. Yeah, I know that it's a chore, but here's the thing. Invoicing is essential. If you don't invoice, you don't get paid, and if you don't get paid, you don't have a business. As simple as that is, invoicing is still a chore. That's why you want to use FreshBooks. It takes the pain and guesswork out of invoicing. An invoice is super simple to set up and send to a client. But best of all, you can actually tell if it's been seen. No more guessing at all. If time passes and your invoice hasn't been opened, maybe it got lost in the shuffle and you should follow up. The other nice thing related to invoicing is that FreshBooks can do the following up for you. You send the invoice, and FreshBooks can send out an automatic reminder if you don't get paid on time. It eliminates the need to set reminders for yourself to set aside time to chase late payments so you can get back to the work at hand. So if you've listened to all this and still aren't using FreshBooks, now is the time to try it. FreshBooks is offering an unrestricted 30-day free trial for listeners of this show. No credit card is required, so just sign up. All you have to do is go to freshbooks.com/appstories and enter App Stories in the How Did You Hear About Us section. That's freshbooks.com/appstories and enter App Stories in the How Did You Hear About Us field. We'll include a link in the show notes too. Thanks so much to FreshBooks for supporting the show. There's a third app here that I think that we ought to mention just because it's really new and it's interesting to me, which is Chirpy. And Chirpy is Twitter on your Apple Watch, which I thought was just a completely bananas idea until I tried it. And it works pretty well. It's a fairly rich app. You can compose tweets, you can view your timeline, you can retweet things. There's all sorts of aspects of Twitter that you can accomplish right from your watch. I mean, it literally doesn't have the iPhone app is nothing more than kind of a shell, really, to deliver the Apple Watch app. And I even the other day, someone had tweeted a video and I tapped play and it actually played the video with the sound. The sound was coming out of my Apple Watch and it wasn't exactly playing video. It was more like it was playing a selection of images from the video. It was kind of like grabbing frames every 10th frame or something and displaying them like a slideshow almost. But, in a pinch, if you're on your Apple Watch, it worked pretty well for what it was. I was really kind of surprised how well it worked.
So do you regularly use it? Do you keep it on your Apple Watch?
Well, it's on my Apple Watch now, but I don't think it's the best way to experience Twitter, notwithstanding the fact that it strikes me as a really interesting technical accomplishment to make it work on the watch. But I wouldn't recommend it as the way you use Twitter. But if you really want to see your timeline and you don't happen to have your phone with you, it is a way to do that. That's not something that I feel compelled to do when I'm out and about without my phone, which is pretty rarely anyway. But it's there and it works pretty well for what it does.
I remember this client called, I don't know, Twime? Is that how you would say that?
I would say Twim.
Twim?
Like IM,
okay.
So Twim, so it's like Twitter IM was the idea there.
So what happened to this client? What did he do, and what happened after the API shut down?
Well, so what Twim did was it worked as an instant messaging platform on top of Twitter direct messages. So it had its own built-in set of emoji and worked really like when you opened it up, it looked very much like you were in the Messages app or something similar to that, WhatsApp, whatever it is. But it was all built on top of DMs. And it was an interesting take on messaging because it was a way to reach people who might not use the same messaging platform that you do, but are also people who use Twitter. And the problem with the API changes is that one of the things that happened is that direct message notifications are delayed. So now all of a sudden, instead of those messages coming back and forth really close to instantly like it would in Messages or WhatsApp or whatever, they're delayed by 2 to 5 minutes or so, which really kind of ruins the instant message experience. Plus, third-party apps aren't allowed to do group direct messages. So you don't have that advantage either, which is something you can do in pretty much every other messaging app that I can think of.
Yeah, this was a great idea. And I remember back in the day, there used to be a bunch of clients that actually did this back in the day when Twitter was not as hostile about its API to third-party developers. I'm pretty sure that I reviewed at least a couple of third-party apps dedicated to Twitter DMs. And I'm talking here like 7-8 years ago. And all of those apps disappeared when Twitter graduated from the, I think, 1.0 to the 1.1 API. And it basically 5 years ago, I think it was, or 4 years ago, a bunch of apps died back then. And basically the same is happening now with these new API enforcements, which is too bad. We should mention other Twitter utilities that we use. One of them, for me at least, that I use all the time is Linky. And Linky, of course, is a MacStories favorite. We mentioned Linky a bunch of times on the site. And I feel like every year when there's a new major version of iOS, we also cover Linky because it tends to get updated for every major new feature of iOS. And Linky, what it does is it's a custom share sheet for Twitter. It supports multiple accounts. It's got syntax highlighting in that your text and links will be colored differently so that you can see what's text, what's a username mentioned, and what's a link. What I love is that it can automatically grab the title and the link of a web page when you invoke the extension in Safari or in Safari View Controller. And also a really handy feature that I use every time I'm tweeting an article from the MacStories homepage. What I do is I open the article in Safari and then I bring up the Linky extension and then I attach a featured image to my tweet. and the featured image is automatically extracted by Linky just by looking at the web page. I don't know if it looks at the semantic markup that we do for Mac Stories, stuff like the Open Graph cover image, that kind of stuff that you can do in HTML. I think it does look at those images. And it's a really convenient way to tweet a link to an article with the title, with the link, and an image that's, basically extracted from the web page. I love Linky. I use it all the time.
I do too. And, you can do text shot type tweets with it as well. If you highlight some text in an article on iOS and use Linky, it'll grab an image of that text with the part that you've highlighted, which is pretty cool too. I don't use that nearly as much as what you just described, but that's handy too.
We should also cover this other utility that I've used in the past, and I think it's useful, but the lack of updates kind of concerns me. The app's name is Charm, and it uses one of the lesser known features of Twitter, the service, the ability to create collections of tweets, kind of like mini timelines where you add the tweets. So it's a way to bundle a bunch of interesting tweets together and share the collection as a link with other people. And we use collections in the past to, for example, group tweets together with a topical structure, sort of like tweets about the latest Apple earnings call or tweets about WWDC 2016 or something. And Charm is an action extension that allows you to add a tweet to an existing collection in your Twitter account. It does one thing really well, but I think it's been updated like twice since it came out on the App Store a few years ago.
Yeah, it has not. It has not been updated much. And, it's one of those apps that I feel like I should use more. And then every time I do, I remember how it never gets updated. And then I wonder, well, do I really want to commit to this? Because what's nice about it to me, too, is that it gives you that it displays the full tweet in Charm, right? So if you collect a lot of things for research or whatever it might happen to be, you get that preview that shows you the tweet, as opposed to something like Notes, where if you drop a tweet into Notes, all you get is a Twitter URL, which is completely meaningless.
Yeah, and I almost feel like an app like Charm, and I don't mean to sound, I with the utmost respect for the developer, but this is the kind of app that should be a feature of Tweetbot or Twitterrific, like the ability to manage collections, because the API is still open to third-party developers. This could be a nice differentiator from the Twitter app, the ability to manage collections and to share collections. This is one of the features that, as Twitter is sort of closing all these other API endpoints, this could be something that third-party clients like Tweetbot should consider. But still, Charm does its job really well. What else do we have here? John, do you schedule tweets often? You are a social media manager, aren't you?
I am kind of the Mac Stories social media manager, I suppose, by default. Yes, I do. And you know why? Because I found that my Monday mornings were getting broken up into an endless sea of tiny little tasks. So instead, what I do now is when I'm putting together things like the show notes for App Stories, I put together all the sponsorship stuff at that time. And that includes the thank you tweets to the sponsors. And instead of having a reminder to tell me to do that on Tuesday morning at some point, I just schedule it in Buffer or Hootsuite. Usually I think I use Hootsuite for App Stories. And then I don't have to worry about it. It may be 7 p.m. on a Saturday night, and I just schedule it, and then I don't have to worry about it next Tuesday. So that's what I do. The only problem is you do have to make sure you get the tweet right, because you don't want to schedule typos.
Yeah, I mean,
which I've been known to do.
What I'm looking at the show notes here. What is Tweet Story?
Tweet Story is an app that it's kind of like one of those photo apps where it says, here's what you took a picture of a year ago or 2 years ago.
Oh no, but for tweets?
It does that, but for tweets. And it's free, and you can go in, like you could go in today, Federico, and look, and it'll go all the way back to the very beginning when you signed up for Twitter. And I'll say, here's what you tweeted a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and so forth. And I don't know, I mean, it's kind of interesting and funny and kind of cringeworthy sometimes to see what you tweeted 7 years ago. If you pay for the in-app purchase, you can actually do the same for other people, which
Wait, what?
Yeah,
What?
like so if I pay the if I buy the in-app purchase, I could set you up and I could look and see what you tweeted 5-6 years ago, which given some of the old tweets being dug up and used against people on Twitter seems a lot more creepy today than maybe it did when this app came out.
Yeah, I don't want to pay for you. Like,
Don't worry, I haven't done so either,
um,
as far as you know.
I need to mention shortcuts or workflow, as it used to be called. The Shortcuts app has a built-in tweetbot actions. These actions launch tweetbot. They are based on Xcallback URL. Also, it has a native tweet action, which brings up the official Twitter share extension, but without having to open the share sheet first. So you can tweet from Shortcuts, but you will need to confirm sending the tweet. You cannot do so in the background. And also Opener, I mentioned recently on Connected, and of course we wrote about this on Mac Stories and on Club Mac Stories. It is a utility to open links from official apps such as Twitter or YouTube or, I don't know, probably Evernote, if there's a bunch of Evernote clients left these days. You can open these official links into third-party clients. So, for example, you can take a Twitter link and open it in Tweetbot, or you can open a YouTube link and open it in a third-party YouTube client. I use this the other way around. Sort of when I'm browsing Tweetbot, I want to see the same tweet but in the Twitter app, so that I can just, if I want to see more information, such as all the replies or all the people who faved or retweeted the message, I can just open from Tweetbot and launch it in Twitter using Opener in the middle. It's an action extension, and it works really, really well for this kind of stuff. The next section in our document, and I think we're reaching the end of our collection of apps for Twitter, as such an ugly name, this section.
It does.
Engagement tracking. Do you do much engagement tracking, John, in your life?
I do not.
Do you track your engagement?
I do not. I didn't know what to call this. This is what people call
engagement.
It, right?
Do they?
I think so.
I don't know.
I think
Okay.
if you're a growth hacker, Federico, this is what you call these things, right?
Oh, no.
Oh, we've got to hack that growth for Mac Stories.
I feel like I need to take a shower after doing
yeah,
this podcast.
so do I. So do I. So,
Oh my God.
all right. So let's start with the easy version of this. Let's start with BirdBrain, because BirdBrain is a free app and it's super simple. All it really does is it tracks Twitter over time, and you can see things like how many followers have you gained in the last week or month or day or year, whatever it is. And you can look at charts that show how many tweets are you tweeting over time. Is it going up? Is it going down? How many retweets are you getting? How many people are you blocking? That sort of thing. It's kind of interesting. I mean, I suppose if you're focused on increasing your follower count, that's one way to do it, to see if your rate's going up or something like that. The other app though that is out there that I have tried but I don't really use, and it's really for someone who's like a social media manager, I would say, is Crowdfire. And Crowdfire, it has some basic free features, but to really get the full value, you need to subscribe to one of their plans. And they have like a million different plans with different features for each one that I'm not going to go into. But you can do things like, I don't know, you can go in and see a list of people who you follow but don't follow you back. So maybe you want to unfollow them out of spite. Or maybe you want to see who unfollowed you but then refollowed you. I mean, it goes down to that level of granularity. It's really kind of amazing. And then you can do things like you can track a competitor. Like I could say, Federico Viticci, that guy's my competitor. And I can go and look and see who is following Federico but not following me. Who do I need to target if I want to have more followers like Federico, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's very gross social media marketing as far as I'm concerned. And I don't personally use it. But there are some insights that can be gained in looking at it. And if that's something you're interested in, Crowdfire is probably one of the leading apps for that.
I have used Crowdfire in the past when I needed to unfollow a bunch of people to sort of. I used to follow almost 1,000 people. Now I'm down to 600 and something. Yeah, it was too much. And I wanted to wrap up by telling you that I used to use BirdBrain years ago. And what I noticed thanks to BirdBrain is that for several years, and I'm pretty sure it's still going on today, there's been this person on Twitter, this guy who keeps
Yeah.
unfollowing me and follow me again a few days later.
Oh, I have that happen too. Who is it?
I
You
honestly,
gotta tell me when we get off. But I've seen the same thing with 2 or 3 different accounts.
I don't know what if they're trying to send a message or something.
Oh, there must be some sort of weird Twitter strategy that's involved in doing that.
I think it is a kind of Twitter strategy in that, like, have you noticed, for example, on Instagram, when people start to sort of like a bunch of your posts, like
yes,
in batch,
like lots of them.
And I asked about this to my friends who are more in tune with what the people do on Instagram. And they told me that people do this when they want to get noticed by you. So you notice these short bursts of likes. And you see this person, you see in the list of notifications, you see the same avatar, the same profile picture. And so you notice this kind of stuff, right? Because it's like 15 likes from the same person. And you go to their profile. So it's a way to sort of grab your attention. And I think I'm following you and following you a few days later for multiple years must be a long strategy to get my attention. But I guess it worked.
It's somebody with a lot of patience. No, I've had like one guy who's done that for me for like the last 2 years.
Oh God. Well, they're playing the long game. And,
all right.
We noticed, but we will not follow you.
Yeah, but we just scratch our head and keep on doing what we're doing. All right, Federico, that's probably a really good place to stop. Where I think we're definitely going downhill at this point. I want to thank our sponsors again, both Timing and FreshBooks, for making this episode possible. And as always, you can find me and Federico over on MacStories.net and of course at Club Mac Stories. Federico is on Twitter, and you know what? Since we're talking about Twitter today, maybe you want to follow Federico if you don't follow him already. He's at Viticci, that's VITICCI, and I'm at John Voorhees, JOHN VOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.